Do you think Halo Infinite looks bad? Are you even going to buy it? People are skeptical of Halo Infinite, to say the very least. At this point, the July demo from last year is still the most significant gameplay footage we've seen of Halo Infinite so far. Images were circulating online implying that the graphics in the game were worse than games from 10 years ago. It has an uncertain future, to say the very least. Before continuing, I just want a quick reminder to subscribe, turn on notifications, and rate 5 stars if this survey pops up. So how do you know whether to buy Halo Infinite or not? If only there were a superhero who could warn us of impending doom. One who could root out terrible video games and bad practice. Remember Cyberpunk? If only there were a hero then to save us from that broken mess. Shazam. Widely met with scorn, he lambasted the state of Cyberpunk before launch, pointing out their repeated errors, lacking features and bad practice. But they would not listen. They were drunk on the Polish wine of CD Projekt lies. He was met with hate and derision from the people. How dare this smug visage point out that the Emperor has no clothes. But they hated him because he told the truth. And on the launch of Cyberpunk, he was vindicated. His grave warnings on the state of the game all came true. The Shazamposter pointed out how the game lacked so many features that were important in a fully detailed world. Lo and behold, the game was criticized for lacking any attention to detail. But why am I bringing this up? How is this relevant? All Shazam is a smug looking promotional image for a movie, chosen solely for its smugness, accompanying some text mocking a game. But Shazam represents an idea, and I believe it's an approach to game criticism which can be informative, critical, and most importantly, entertaining. Shazam has had his fill of the coping cybercucks now. He's turned his eye to new games, namely Halo Infinite. Regardless of how good the game ends up being, there has been a phenomenon of mass cope surrounding Halo Infinite since the July demo. Now what would happen if we were to take this critical mocking approach towards Halo Infinite? Would it affect whether we buy the game, whether we purchase it day one, pre-order it, get it on Game Pass, or don't buy it at all? Well, let's see. It doesn't need to play like classic Halo. It doesn't need to not have sprint. It doesn't need to not have advanced mobility. It doesn't need dual wielding. It doesn't need multiple biomes. It doesn't need playable elites. It doesn't need full color selection. It doesn't need to not have microtransactions. It doesn't need to come out within 5 years of the previous game. It doesn't need to have a good demo. It doesn't need to have transparent shield recharge. It doesn't need to visually display the ammo. It doesn't need the iconic shotgun. It doesn't need the iconic pistol. It doesn't need to have texture on the walls. It doesn't need to have good management. You are now here. It doesn't need to be fun. It doesn't need to be functional. It doesn't need to have a good story. It doesn't need to cut the story and sell it as DLC. A seemingly dire and hopeless situation for the Infinite defenders. But will Halo Infinite even be worth playing? Well, first of all, let's examine some of these points. Halo Infinite won't have dual wielding or playable elites. This is for balance reasons, but is balance really a good reason to cut features? Games don't need to be perfectly balanced. Not every game needs to be just about clicking enemies and perfect accuracy. I think 343 puts too much of a premium on the opinions of competitive players. There can't be any sort of imbalance, no matter how fun. But the truth is, competitive play is merely the result of popularity. The most competitive Halo game was Halo 3, which had both dual wielding and elites. Is it just a coincidence that it was also the best selling Halo game? What about the removal of the shotgun and pistol? This has happened before, 343 cutting iconic aspects of Halo so they can make their own mark on the series. To be honest, in theory, I don't mind this. They can change whatever they like. I want a new experience. I want to see some exciting new stuff in a brand new game, but in practice, it's terrible. If you want to replace something iconic, you should replace it with something that is at least as good or interesting as the original. 343 so far hasn't done that. They cut the classic rocket launcher design in Halo 5 for what? This generic green tube? How about the point on the management? The game taking over 5 years? Not having a good demo? These all relate to how the game has been managed thus far, that being poorly. It's no secret now that the game's development has been a mess. They got Joe Staten in last year and the fans are hoping that he can set things straight. But that's all it is. Hope. What about the microtransactions and the color? Well, this refers to the armor coding debacle. The game won't have traditional color selection. Instead, it'll have pre-made armor coding system, which is tied to the progression and microtransaction systems. Again, this is a case of removing options that were present in the previous games. This time it's worse due to the fact that they're monetizing it. They're planning to make money from cutting features. Next, those points about classic Halo, about the gameplay and advanced mobility. There's been an endless debate about adding these new features like advanced mobility and sprint to Halo, and whether or not it's good. People say that Halo needs to evolve. Its refusal to adapt has left it in the dirt and irrelevant. This is despite the fact that no Halo multiplayer has had classic movement for nearly 14 years now. The last Halo multiplayer to not have sprint is still the best-selling game in the series. It is still the most popular. Despite many Halo fans' opposition to sprint, they begrudgingly accept when it shows up in the next game. They cope. But so far, it hasn't been proven to work well as a mechanic. So, will it be worth buying Halo Infinite when it presumably comes out at the end of this year? Sounds like a resounding no. Seems like Shazam claims another victim. But that's not the whole story. What if we look at the bigger picture? What has 343 done to earn our trust? There is certainly the chance that Halo Infinite won't be a complete dumpster fire. One thing that's almost guaranteed to be good is the Forge mode. Since Halo 3, Halo has had the Forge mode. At first it was just a map editor. You could change spawns and weapon placements and object placements. But people soon discovered tricks such as object phasing, exploiting the timers to build their own geometry within a level. From that point on, it evolved into a map builder. Halo 3 custom games exploded with creative custom game modes making clever use of the limited object budgets available in the mode. Bungie lent into this at first with Foundry, a DLC map constructed entirely of Forge objects. You could delete all of the objects in the map and essentially get a blank canvas. This further boosted the creativity of the community, giving us modes such as Duck Hunt, Trash Compactor, and Griffball. They further expanded upon this map building concept with Sandbox, a Forge map which contained 3 different canvases. It also had a larger range of unique Forge blocks that made building maps significantly easier. The introduction of the file share was also an innovation for console that allowed the greatest sharing of user-generated content. Halo Reach was a drastic upgrade, giving a full range of Forge blocks, built-in object phasing, precision editing, and a massive world to forge on. A Forge world, if you will. One downside of Halo Reach Forge was that every single map was grey. Everything. The walls, the floors, the ceiling, even the decor. Forge is the one aspect that 343 has gone on to almost objectively improve. It actually took a step down at first with the launch of Halo 4 with several tiny maps and a gimped infection mode, but they tried to rectify it at least with the massive Forge Island canvas. Halo 5 is where it really took off. Scripting, prefabs, custom textures, basically the most advanced map builder short of an actual level editor. Good news is, the creator of Halo 5 Forge is now leading Halo Infinite multiplayer. I think Halo Infinite Forge will be expanded even further. 343 and Microsoft has taken a far more open approach recently towards mod support. This, combined with the PC release of Halo Infinite, opens up almost unlimited avenues for creative game modes. Forge is something to look forward to for sure. There might be some other reasons for optimism as well that aren't just connected to the Forge mode. 343 has been giving us little nuggets that seem pretty good, and in my personal opinion, it'll likely be better than Halo 5. They don't seem to repeat the same mistakes twice, they just seem to find new ones to make. Surely, 343 are running out of mistakes to make sometime soon. Back to the updates. These little nuggets. 343 has been detailing specific parts of the game each month since December. In December, they covered the art and graphics. They all but confirmed the theories we had. The July demo was rushed. The graphics were incomplete. The enemy models were lacking any of the planned detail and animation. Although it is impossible to know if this was their plan all along, or if they changed their plan following the reception to the demo. Of course, they do claim it was their plan all along. They also released a few select screenshots that look a lot better than what we'd seen earlier. They discussed the art style. One thing of note is that the whole game is just in one biome, based on the Pacific Northwest of the United States. They explained the simple hexagons with no texture were intentional, but they would have more detail at release. They would show the greater effects of time in wearing down the surfaces. They also went on to again tout the Halo Reach level of customization. This is despite the fact that they have the armor coding system. They went over said armor coding system in further detail. So far we haven't really seen any proof that the armor coding system isn't a downgrade from previous games' level of customization. In January, they elaborated on game design. They explained how Halo Infinite wouldn't be like Far Cry. It would be an open world, but it wouldn't have levels, progression, XP, etc. And it wouldn't have crafting. It'd still have the Halo gameplay loop. They explained how they wanted to elevate player choice. They gave an anecdote of a wraith being pushed off the side of a Halo ring to display the choice you have in the sandbox. The grapple hook was another feature. It brings you towards things. It brings objects towards you, but it can't bring enemies towards you. To be honest, while a grappling hook is new for Halo, it's not exactly super original or fresh. It could still be fun though. What happened to space combat, global battles, water vehicles? These are some of the real gameplay innovations we need. We need a massively bigger multiplayer. 343 also explained how they were bringing back an equipment system reminiscent of Halo 3. This seems like a good idea for the gameplay. So far, the equipment shown looks similar to equipment from Halo 3. It kinda seems like they know what they're doing, but at the same time, it kinda doesn't. One thing that seemed interesting was the little Joe Staten closing statement. A statement, if you will. He described how he navigated those hunters. In the past, you kinda dodge around hunters like a toreador, but now they're smarter. They turn quicker. This is a phenomenon known as power creep. When the player is made more powerful, everything else needs to be made stronger to compensate, lest the game become too easy. Payday 2 is a perfect example of this phenomenon. I will note that this new hunter combat could still be more interesting because of the new AI behavior. Having more powers and power creep isn't necessarily bad. In February, they covered the campaign, going into more detail with the art and showing off some stuff like the time of day and weather systems. They also explained the in-game wildlife. It wouldn't actually play a part in the gameplay at all, like the Guta from Halo Reach. The creatures you see running around are basically just set dressing. They also unveiled screenshots which looked much better than what we've seen previously. Besides that, they confirmed the silver pillars do exist to limit the grapple hook. The March update is often overlooked. It covered the audio system in detail. They explained how the dynamic audio system would change the volume of sounds from certain sources depending on how important they were. For example, weapon fire would be louder than most other sounds. The soundtrack would be by 3 composers and span over 2 hours of material. They clearly have a lot of very high quality audio work going into this game. They have countless field recordings which come together to create the soundscape for the next game. In previous Halos, they often used stock sound effects, warped and modified to fit certain weapons. This gave them a unique sound, but was obviously fakery. Quite often, they sound like things that couldn't really exist. They also showed off some of the ambient sounds and the bullet sounds. The ambient sounds were good. The Forerunner interior sounded haunting. The bullets sounded loud and punchy, less like the artificial clinking of Halo 5. The technical team also went into detail about how the audio would be implemented. They'd have a full acoustic simulation. What that means is that the game will simulate how sounds move in real life. Think of dynamic lighting in a game. It simulates how lights move in real life using vectors and complex mathematics, basically tracing its movement from point A to point B in a simulated space. It changes the light based on materials, direction, and countless other factors. This is that, but for sound. In the past, sound was simple. When within a certain vicinity of a source, a trigger, a sound would play. This slowly became more complex. The volume of the sound would depend on how close you were to the source. Then they started layering different sounds depending on your distance from the source. When up close, they'd play the classic shooting sound. Further away, it would be more muffled. It would sound like distant shots echoing around. This new Halo Infinite system basically means you hear the sound coming from where it actually comes from. You won't hear through walls anymore. The sound will travel to you through the nearest opening, and it will sound as though it's coming from there. This is quite exciting. The April update is the most recent, just making it in at the end of the month. They mentioned some of the PC features. They want an unobtrusive anti-cheat, no root access Valorant Chinese spyware, a decent looking options screen and support for ultra-wide resolutions. There are examples of what the game would look like in an ultra-wide resolution. I got to say, while the game is looking better, it's still got a couple of rough edges. This Forerunner interior with the Guardian looks quite good, but the character models clash with the environment a bit. There's also this dreadful Vaseline filter over the image that makes the edges look blurry. It seems like they did that to correct the aliasing. They mentioned a wealth of audio logs to discover throughout the game. One very interesting point that people missed is the one on technical debt. Technical debt is what happens when the team makes compromises in their tools in order to produce a working product, to get the game out the door. So rather than upgrading their technology or workflow, they just use the existing ones that they're already familiar with. This debt of not upgrading their technology for Halo 4 and 5 seems at least partially to blame for the time since the last Halo game. It also seems partially responsible for the way the July demo looked. 343 now claim they're in the shutdown/polish phase of development. I'm assuming that means it's content complete. The little statement hinted at more gameplay footage come E3, although he referred to it as game industry event season, so perhaps the footage may be coming sooner than E3. But will it save Halo? 343 has mostly been technically competent, at least for Halo 4 and 5, but good tech doesn't guarantee a great game. Will Halo Infinite be worth buying? Well, as it turns out, it may not even matter. I put out a poll a while ago on whether people plan to buy Halo Infinite. The highest voted answer was waiting for sale. It seems that people are at least somewhat interested, but maybe burned by pre-orders of the past, by previous games that have been Shazammed. People are clamoring for more Halo, hence all the cope, ignoring the red flags and hoping for the game to be good. One response though, that I kept getting on the post that I just couldn't escape, was Game Pass. Why bother paying full price? Why bother even waiting for reviews? You can play the game for no extra cost with the service you're already subscribed to, and decide on your own whether you like it or not. I redid the poll and lo and behold, Game Pass won. By a lot. Microsoft has been playing the long game with this Game Pass strategy. They're looking to pass 30 million subscribers by the time Halo Infinite rolls around. Clearly, as evidenced by the free-to-play multiplayer, they really just want people playing the game in any capacity. Purchases don't matter too much to them. Microsoft is betting big on this and they're going to push it hard. The only way for it to not take off is if it is completely horrific. But you never know with 343. Anyway, thanks for watching. I had a cold for this video so it might have affected my audio a bit, but thanks for understanding. Thank you to the Nerd Army. Please subscribe, join the Discord, and this is ShreddedNerd saying goodbye.
What is it? More brutes?
Worse.